Okay guys, hi, welcome to Detonation magazine interview. My name is Matt McKay and I'm reporting from Meltdown 2012 here in Wales, and I am honoured and privileged to be interviewing a guitarist from one of my favourite bands ever. Really pleased that he's been able to come down. I'm with Mike Reynolds from For Today. How's it going, man?
Doing really good.
Cool,
man.
awesome.
Really good.
Awesome. First things first, how's your travel been down to the UK? Been alright?
It's been awesome. Everything's been golden.
Been smooth, yeah?
Perfect.
Cool. You've no problems with the flight or anything?
Nothing. We were in Germany with the band before all this, and we went to Italy for about 10 days with some family that I have in Italy, and then we came here. So the flight to the UK was only a couple hours.
That's cool.
So, yeah,
that's pretty good. Did you have any plain food?
Yeah, on the way over we had some, the chicken or pasta, it was the same thing. Yeah, it's alright.
You're right with plain food, you don't mind it?
It's fine. I don't really eat very much on the plane, so
okay.
I'll drink coffee and that's but
awesome. Is it your first time in the UK then, or?
This is my second time in the UK. This is my first time getting to actually enjoy it and see it.
Cool.
There's before when we were traveling in kind of closed quarters, didn't really get to see much of even outside, and it was kind of rainy, so it's been a lot better this time over.
Yeah, we're in Wales, not in England, so the weather tends to be a little bit better in Wales than England, so yeah.
The sunshine over here.
Cool. So you're not travelling alone, you're with your wife?
I'm with my wife,
yeah,
that's
cool.
right. We didn't get married to be apart.
Yeah,
so
awesome, so it's great fun to have it with you.
It's been great, yeah. Cool. It's so much better. We've done a lot of traveling apart from each other, and a lot of our engagement and even our dating was spent apart from each other, and she wasn't going to be traveling with me before we were married, and it was just it's just been excellent. Like we got married in September and have had a lot of traveling, and recently we just kind of both came to the conviction and realization that we're kind of like, we shouldn't be spending the weeks and months apart from each other, so we got that fixed, and now she's traveling with me full time.
Fantastic, cool.
Yeah.
So why exactly are you over here in the UK then? Why especially are you at Meltdown for this weekend?
Well, kind of a couple different reasons actually. Matty was first asked, was requested to be here, and he wasn't able to, and so me and him had a conversation about it, and he sent over an email to Dave Williams, just recommending that he send the invite my way, and me and Suzanne have been praying about the UK actually specifically for a little bit of time now, that we both feel that there's something going on in the United Kingdom, and we're not totally sure what it's all about, but we have some other friends who had come to do open air evangelism in Cardiff, and they had told us about it, and they told us kind of the circumstances in the UK, and just kind of just how people are, and pretty I guess I don't know how to say it. A pretty religious environment, and so it's been pretty interesting, just kind of how it's worked out for us to finally be here. So awesome. I would say it's been a work of the Lord.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, for sure. So how's God impacted your life then? Obviously you're over here for specific purposes. How has God sort of directed you here? Like, on what how has He impacted your life? Can you give a bit of your testimony a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. We it was 2006. I got a little bit shaken. I had gone to church, done all the seemingly right things, and I ended up going to a kind of like a counseling center when I was 16 years old to get kind of rehabilitated from some situations, and ultimately what it did is it kind of scared me into taking it a little bit more seriously, and within the year after that, though, I just kind of gone back to the same old, everything's fine, and I had a gentleman named Jesse who became one of my really close friends. In the States, he kind of sat me down and had a real conversation with me, and was not scared to tell me what was what. Was not scared. It's some folks will get scared with the gospel. They'll suppose that people are going to be turned off from it. But the truth is, if the real gospel goes out, it's better to have 2 people converted to the real gospel than to have the masses converted to a false gospel. And so he sat down and he gave it to me, and he shared it with me, and he was kind of like a pretty serious gentleman that I had known for a while. The band had worked with him, and I just recall his life, and I don't even know that we ever sat down and had this face-to-face conversation, but his life was just so challenging to my life because it was different, and he didn't spend his time on the things that I spent my time on, and it was so much different than the regular old going to church a couple times a week or whatever, and then slapping a tag that says Christian, acceptable to God, and he really lived and he really believed it, and he's been, you know, faithful for years and years and years. And he actually was, at the time that I met him, was leading practically all of the youth in his city to the Lord. And over the course of 6 years, there had been about 60 of the youth in the skate that go to the skate park in his city that had come to know the Lord and were attending a Bible study weekly. And so he was having a very awesome and authentic like movement of the Lord going on like in his city, and it just hit me. I was like, there's something so totally different about what this guy believes and what I claim to believe, you know. So that was in probably 2006, 2007, and even into 2008 a little bit, where I was being pretty influenced by his life. And then the Lord, you know, when a person gets connected with the Lord, he takes it from there. He starts doing pretty wild work, you know.
For sure.
So I'd say that's been, yeah, it's just it's a journey. It's a little bit of a trek sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you integrate your ministry then with For Today? Because obviously Matty is sort of tends to be more of the voice of the band at times, and obviously you YouTube Matty Montgomery For Today, and you'll see him speaking on stage so much.
Yeah, 100%.
You not so much. Do you sort of just let Matty use For Today as a ministry? I mean, how do you integrate? How much involvement do you have with the band in terms of the ministry, or do you tend to keep your ministry sort of separate from what the band does?
No, totally. That's it's very much integrated. But you look at any particular ministry, you don't need two guys speaking the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a cooperation of sorts, and when it's a body, there's you know, some people will be like, well, there's this fivefold ministry, and the Bible talks about the apostles, prophets, evangelists, teachers, and pastors, and it splits it up sometimes. But ultimately, my responsibility is to look like Jesus. And some people get so categorized with the fivefold ministry that they'll suppose, well, I'm this and not that. But the truth is that when I'm with the band, my role is very different than when I'm traveling on my own. And still an evangelist, still a teacher, but ultimately, from moment to moment, whatever it is that the work is beckoning me to do. If you were to suppose that I'm supposed to look like Jesus, then when there's a sick person, it's like, well, now we're going to pray for healing. And when there's a person who doesn't know the Lord, it's now we're going to share the gospel.
To it, yeah.
You have to be able to move because it's the Holy Spirit's intention with talking about the fivefold ministry wasn't it was to help expand with church government. It wasn't supposed to become these categories. Well, I do this and not that, because the goal is that we live and breathe and act and have our being in Christ. And when that's going on, you know, all of the ministries are taken care of, you know. So, yeah. So when I'm with the band, you know, we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I remain involved in, and then Matty has been the leader of the band for, you know, since he was with us as just a spiritual leader, as the evangelist, as the voice, and even as like the face of the band. He's had a lot of really tremendous things come about, and even in the last few years with his personal ministry and with the things that have come from For Today, and it's been a tremendous blessing. He's one of my very best friends, and we've found a harmony in a way to be working together, because some folks would suppose like, well, you preach and he preaches, why is one talking less? Is there any offense, or is there any weird stuff? And there is not, and there is a harmony, you know what I mean? And when the time comes for me to speak, it's the same way with Matty, where we're able to have, when he's speaking, I'm praying for him, and when I'm speaking, he's praying for me. There's because it's a team, you're aiming for the same goal. Doesn't matter who kicks it in, as long as it goes in.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, okay, how did the band get together, and did you have like particular objectives that you wanted to reach when you started the band, or did your objectives sort of, did you form the band and then have objectives afterwards, or how did it all come together? Well,
the band had started in 2005 or 2006, and the band wasn't a Christian band as a whole. Actually, only our drummer was a believer, and so he basically systematically led all of us to the Lord, almost one after the other.
That's amazing.
It went from Ryan, our other guitar player, to Brandon, our bass player, and then to me, finally. I gave my life to the Lord, and, you know, I'm pretty sure it's 2006. I think it was the end of 2006. And from that point, there was only the four of us. We all kind of came to this agreement where it was like, well, what are we doing? You know, like, we've all come to this new life in the Lord, and He's shaking us up. What are we doing with this band? And we actually made a corporate decision that was like, well, we wouldn't really have any business to do anything but hope to honor God. And so we were kind of like, Lord, if it honors you for this band to remain, then it will remain. And you have to show us how how it's going to honor you, or we will just fold the whole thing. You know?
Sure.
And then he just began to reveal that, you know, from the way that we were praying for one another, the way that we were encouraging one another, the way we were being consistent in reading the Word, or in talking to kids, or however you want to go with it. It was really just kind of a work of God for us to stay together and for us to have the like-mindedness on wanting the Lord to be honored, you know?
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the UK, we don't have what the US has. We haven't got Scream the Prayer, we haven't got Cornerstone or Sunshine, and none of that. It's really sort of a small growing sort of ministry. Meltdown is the only thing of its kind in the whole of the UK.
Yeah.
So, I mean, have you got any advice for anyone sort of wanting to start up a Christian band? Because we have only got so many bands that are Christian in the UK. Have you got any advice for anyone wanting to start up a Christian band to do, you know, to be involved in this movement? Have you got any sort of advice in terms of like how to go about doing it? What are the key sort of things that you need to keep in mind when you are starting it up?
Absolutely, man. We Psalms 37 says, "Commit your way unto the Lord, and He will bring it to pass." And it's this constant committing it to the Lord. I suppose it's actually to your guys' benefit that it is somewhat more, you know, seen more as proselytizing to be preaching the gospel. It's seen more offensive. It's seen as more, it's less common, you know, and this is the benefit, is that in the States it has become so incredibly easy to say, I'm a Christian, and it costs you nothing. It's free. It's free to say that you're a Christian in the United States. And, you know, whether or not that's true from God's perspective or not, people say it all day, every day, thinking that saying it with their mouth is somehow going to change something. What I do like is that when it costs you something, you eliminate a whole horde of people who are just going to fake it. And so the difference between saying it and being it obviously are quite great, but the thing is, you're not going to have any Christian band who calls themselves a Christian band preaching the gospel unless they're serious about it, because it costs so much. You know, does that make sense? Kind
Sure,
of.
absolutely.
You get a lot of people mentioning the Lord's name because it costs them nothing in the United States. But here, if you have a person stand up and preach the gospel in the awkwardness of being in a club or a bar or whatever, it is actually going to cost them something, and they have to count it up, add it up in their minds whether it's worth it or not.
Sure.
And so I say it's to your guys' advantage, because you're able to actually offer something to the Lord. You know, King David said that he wouldn't offer to God something that cost him nothing, and that's the essence of worshiping God. It costs us something. And it's the same thing with a relationship. What makes romance is that it's not done for yourself. You know what I mean?
Selfless.
That's selfless, and that's what honors God the most, is when it's no longer done for ourselves, but it's done as an offering, a love offering to Him. And so it's like, if you can do it for free in the States, I mean, by all means preach the gospel, but there is something to the authenticity and the sincerity of preaching the gospel, and it's going to cost you everything you've got.
For sure. I mean, I think that sometimes the gospel can be so overlooked when preaching and you know, and giving ministry. I think maybe sometimes it's we need to just go back to basics and keep it simple. Is that something that you feel strongly about?
100%. Yeah.
Cool. So, what do you think is crucial then for the growth in the UK in the alternative, you know, in the Christian alternative hardcore sort of metal scene? What do you think's like, what is fundamental for it to grow, especially for Meltdown Festival and for things like Detonation as well?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I don't have an easy answer for it, because unfortunately a lot of these kinds of things become a facade. These kinds of things can become fake or feigned or made up. They can be designed to get a reaction and designed to get a certain thing. And it's happened with a lot of festivals in the States as well. They have a Christian label, but ultimately they're concerned with numbers or growth much more than they are with the truth of the gospel. And so if you don't want it to grow, preach the gospel as authentically as possible, and it'll probably stay a pretty small size and maybe not grow at all. Or there's the alternative, where you have in Scripture, you have the gentleman who preached the truth and nobody liked it. And Jeremiah spent 40 years preaching and nobody really cared or changed, you know. Yeah. But then Peter's first sermon, 3,000 people are added to the church. So there's this combination. You have one of two results. Either the Lord will be lifted up and offend everybody, or the Lord will be lifted up and draw all men unto Himself. So I'm not always really sure how to help something like that grow, because it's grown a lot in the United States because of compromise. But the thing that causes the real authentic gospel to grow is persecution. And which is a crazy thought when you think about it.
Yeah, it sort of defeats the object of wanting it to grow. You just can't.
In fact, sometimes people have to be made angry for it to actually grow at all. And,
for sure.
Because you don't want simply the numbers to grow, but you want the authenticity to grow. And Jesus focused in on 12 men. He wasn't concerned with having 2,000 spiritual sons or whatever. He wasn't concerned with the numbers of the networking as much as the authenticity of a few. And I heard a guy that I respect as a preacher once say, he said the synonym for apostolic is authentic, and he said that apostolic is simply that which is most authentic, and I've come to agree with that very much, that the word apostolic actually means sent, and you don't send an empty package. You send the most filled, the most ready to go package. You're not going to send a box to somebody with nothing in it. Yeah. And the Lord is the same. He does not send empty boxes. He fills up the boxes. He makes sure that his own life is put into that box. He makes sure that it's something of himself, and that is the thing that we want more than anything. We don't want I don't want the easy Christianity to grow anymore. You know what I mean? I honestly want it to be kind of cut out. I enjoy and hope the day advances where there will be an opposition to preaching the gospel again, that we can come back to the truth of the gospel that cuts people to the heart, that is a pain, it says that it's the aroma of death to those who are perishing, you know what I mean, and that it can come back to the truth of it, the realness of it, the weight of it, and all that it actually is. And the music scene may not grow at all, but the church will. The real church will, the authentic church will, yeah. For sure. So I don't have any advice, I guess, for that.
Well, that's cool. That answers it.
For the music.
That's fine. That's cool.
Right.
So we've already talked about sort of being essentially facing persecution as a Christian band. What sort of barriers do you think then the Christian bands? I mean, sort of troubles that they face in being accepted in a secular scene. Obviously, it can be hard to sort of speak to people about Jesus and the gospel in front of people who probably wouldn't accept it. I mean, there are other sort of barriers like obviously tattoos and stuff. In the church wouldn't really, you sort of segregate from the church because of tattoos, and then you're also sort of segregated from the secular audience because you're Christian. Sort of how.
Man, there was there was a gentleman. Have you ever heard of the Azusa Street Revival?
I haven't.
It was directly tied to the Welsh Revival, which is interesting, being in Wales. It followed the year after, and it followed after a guy named Frank Bartleman and another gentleman named William Seymour read a pamphlet called "I Was at the Welsh Revival," and they read the pamphlet and they said, "Boy, I'd really like that to be here." William Seymour was a black man whose parents were slaves. And it was in the early 1900s where there was still quite a lot of segregation and a pretty huge lack of acceptance of colored folks, especially preaching the gospel, and especially to white people, William Seymour was so hungry for the Lord that he found himself at a man who wouldn't allow him into his classroom, into his teaching area, because he was black. He found himself outside of the door, listening through the cracks, knowing that that man still had something true to say. And I would say it's a similar situation, that if a person would walk into a church and be rejected for their tattoos, for their earrings, for their piercings, I say, go back. Go back to the church until they accept you or whatever. But if you're hungry for the truth, they have the truth there. And Jesus said to the Pharisees, he said, do what they say. He said, but don't do what they do. You know what I mean? And I believe William Seymour was one of the stewards of the Azusa Street Revival, which is one of the bigger revivals, and even a kind of a standard type revival similar to the Welsh Revival that we even have in Christianity, and one of the most authentic movements of God. But it was by a man who was hungry enough that, despite the segregation, despite sometimes the offense of the way that man would look, was hungry enough to go still and get the truth, and by all means, listen to them, but obey what they say, but don't do what they do. And I'd say that's definitely with these kids, we got the tattoos and the music they listen to. It's like, well, if you're really hungry for God, I guarantee you that the truth of the Word is going to be found there. And if you want it bad enough, then you're going to have to put up with a whole bunch of mess to get it and go for it. For sure. So we had all sorts of issues with churches, and we wanted it, and we went and got it. And it's not always easy, but it is right. It's not easy, but it is right.
What sort of could you sort of maybe give us an insight into some of the problems that for today is hard in terms of being maybe accepted in a secular sort of audience? What sort of, is there any sort of incidences that come to mind?
Yeah, well, the incident, the worst part is when we try to be accepted in a secular group, you know, when it becomes this thing of, well, the hope is to be, you know, acceptable to everybody. That is actually where we lose already. I'd say the coolest and I'd say the most important dynamic of Christianity that we so often miss is that being holy actually means to be different. I would actually say that conformity is the anti-holy, and not the conformity in the sense of the clothes that you wear, the whatever, but I'm talking about the beat that you walk to, the system that you pledge allegiance to, and even the man you pledge allegiance to. It defies the world's politics, the world system, the world's entertainment, the world's music, all of these things. So the hope is not simply that people are offended for the sake of being offended, but simply that it is different enough to reflect light on the darkness that people are living in. And so I'd say that if we're being too widely accepted, I would get concerned about it. You know what I mean? I'd say that if people didn't have anything negative to say, you know, I think we got called proselytes the other day in a magazine, you know, kind of excited me. I was like, well, that's not, you know, it's kind of true. I guess it is true. I mean, we want people to be converted, to follow Jesus. That's no lie. But simply, you know, the desire to fit in with the secular scene is folly. It would be a problem. But simply existing as men of God, playing somewhat of an alternative style of music that is sometimes misunderstood for the sake of rescuing some. You know, we've actually seen the most amount of fruit when we are least accepted by the scene as a whole. And obviously kids come to our shows, and obviously kids will like the band. They'll enjoy those aspects of the music, and we kind of look at it as a platform, an opportunity. You know, we pray that the Lord would open doors. We see it as an open door, and we preach the gospel there, you know.
Yeah.
But as soon as magazines start saying they're not bothered by our music, we'll probably be done with what we're doing, you know. Like, I think the Lord will start shutting it down. So
that'll never happen. You guys are too good, man.
Dude, I hope that they don't start liking us too soon. You know, so liking us like that, you know.
Yeah. So do you prefer to tour with other Christian bands, or do you more prefer to go more sort of secular, non-Christian bands in the hope that maybe you can sort of reach out to them? What sort of is your agenda with that? What do you prefer to do? Yeah. And do you have any particular bands that you enjoy touring with?
Dude, yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome question. We tour with all bands, so we've had no preference. You know, we did Scream the Prayer for two different years, and we've done, you know, we're doing Warped Tour this year, where I think we're maybe one of 2 Christian bands on the entire tour. You know, so.
You come to the UK Warped Tour?
No, we're not. We're doing the US and Canada Warped Tour.
Okay.
But so it kind of changes, you know.
That.
We'll do some where there's all Christian bands. We'll do some where there's no Christian bands, and we just kind of do all of it. We have we have guys that have definitely become just really good friends. You know, just genuine dudes that we enjoy hanging out with and stuff. And some guys that we're always hanging out with when we're in New York is the guys from Straight from the Path. I don't know if you guys. Yeah, great band, and those guys are really, really cool. And we've enjoyed building that friendship. And we've always kind of had, you know, this like we've just always had a good relationship from the first tour we did with them. I think that those guys are all awesome, and we had Drew on our last record, and we've always just had a really good connection with them. The guys in Winds of Plague as well, and I'd say there's a good number of bands in the States that we've just made real good connections with, you know, and we really like the guys in Winds of Plague and the guys in Straight from the Path, especially those are the 2 that I can think of as kind of like my favorites, you know. But no, yeah, it's kind of everybody that we can, you know, and the hope is, you know, the coolest thing is that when you're on tour with somebody, they get to observe your life. They'll hear you preaching from the stage every day, but when they get to watch your life, hopefully they see something that's different. And if they don't, everything that's said on stage doesn't matter at all. You know what I mean? Like, they hear one thing but see another, and that's, my mom told me, she said, your actions will speak louder than your words. And I didn't understand it, but if I say that I'm a Christian but live like a heathen, I'm actually a heathen no matter what I say. It's like, it's that thing of, I have to understand what my actions are saying, especially to all the people around me, and there's a pressure to it, and there's an excitement to it, and there's, I believe God is glorified ultimately in that, you know, like in the actions of it more than anything else.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was that said this, but someone was a famous like poet or author or something said, you know, you should preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words.
Yeah, St. Francis. He
Yeah.
he was an open air evangelist, which I think is so ironic. He was an open air evangelist. He said
Using his mouth.
He was using his mouth
But he
all
said,
the time.
yeah.
He preached to animals.
Oh,
And
really?
He would draw a crowd with animals.
It says,
he was
you know, preach gospel to all creatures, doesn't it? So.
No, yeah, and he took that scripture and he began preaching to animals and actually would draw a crowd of animals to listen to him preach the gospel, which I think is a pretty awesome thing. But
Dr. Doolittle of his day.
But I think it's the thing is that they have to be meeting together. You know, that it's, if you can't preach the gospel with your life and be noticeably, that your life should be offensive. It's like, why are you going to bed so early? It's like, well, I have an appointment in the morning with the Lord. You know what I mean? There has to be a difference. There has to be things going on that are different, that are strange, that are set apart. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, hey, that guy won't even look at the TV screen when he walks past it, or that guy won't, you know what I mean? That guy's not even hardly ever on Facebook, or whatever you could possibly begin to name. You know, we so readily and quickly just jump right into the culture around us sometimes, and it's a pretty easy time to be set apart if we are willing to do it, if we're willing to pay the price. I think there's a good number of things that are blatantly obvious that most Christians just ignore completely, and that we want to be able to have it be an obvious thing where it's like no, I'll have no part of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, why do you wear your shirts inside out? Because I'm not going to represent a band that's, you know what I mean, that doesn't honor the Lord. Like, whatever. You could have these 100 different things that could come up and be like, well, that's just what I do because I am not living unto your approval, but I'm living unto the smile and the pleasure of God. And that's a strange thing to live out. You know what I mean? Like, but no, yeah, I like that quote a lot. I like St. Francis and what I've read of him, and it's very important to have your life be in agreement with what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, couple last questions. New album coming out. I am so excited for this. Yeah. So I mean, with from going from Portraits to Breaker, did you think there was much progression from that album? I mean, I listened to a lot of Portraits album, and I don't know, to Breaker it sounded a bit more hardcore, a bit more sort of a few more breakdowns, and it's especially with Devastator track, it just starts off really just punchy, like really punchy. Has there been much of a progression and change from Breaker to Immortal? Or have you sort of kept the sound the same?
I'd say like we're hoping to mature with still remaining the same group. We want to be the same, kind of the same sound, but just hopefully a more matured sound. I think we've come across with that pretty well with from the CDs we have out now, from Portraits to Breaker, and then I feel the same from Breaker to Immortal, but I do suppose there are some things that are noticeably different. We have a song that has more singing than we've ever had on any song, but we also have a couple like songs that are heavier than probably any of the other songs we've ever done before too. So maybe it's just becoming more of a range. Maybe, the dynamic is hopefully growing, where we're hitting some of the more singing parts, and we're also hitting some of the heavier parts as well.
Awesome.
So I think it's still the same sound for sure, but we did a little bit different with the kind of the interlude kind of things, and
Breaker, with the poetry. Can you explain that for maybe people who don't really know what that sort of is about?
Yeah, that worked out. That was a miracle. We talked to a gentleman named Jose Palos, who was a poet from Los Angeles, or from Southern California at least, and we had talked to him about the concept of the record, about the idea of kind of like the Holy Spirit breaking through a situation or circumstance or whatever, and especially just kind of breaking through the system of the world, And we kind of gave him the idea, and he sent us back this poem that was, this 6 or 7 minute poem of his testimony.
So he wrote this specifically for the album?
Yeah, he wrote it, and he wrote it, and man, it was awesome. And we were listening to it, and we were like, goodness gracious. But none of it was recorded to a click track or a metronome or anything of the sort. So we were like, dude, I don't know how we're going to put this poetry in our record at all. And so we were kind of like, this is so awesome, but we don't know how to use it.
Did you be able to edit it at all? And
we had to edit it a ton, and we did a lot of work to it, which we still maintained the integrity of the poem. The incredible thing was that we ended up cutting out, I think, like 2 minutes or something like that, and we had, made sure everything was cool with Jose, and we cut out some of the time of it, and we maintained the integrity of the poem perfectly. I mean, where it was exactly the same message was getting relayed, and I had no idea how you can do that with something where you take out a third of something and have
I YouTubed the poem, And it was a lot longer than I expected it to be, watching him like speak it live at a conference or something. And I was like, there's a ton of it. It's not on the record, but the message is still so constant.
We would have loved to have all of it in there. We kind of came up against a brick wall, and our producer, Will Putney, is he's kind of like a sound magician kind of a guy. He's just really good at what he does, and he was very important in that process of getting the tracks put together. And there was a few parts that Ryan just wrote on, kind of like on location and in the studio, like figuring out parts to write and drum parts and, like Ebo parts and all of the other stuff, So it was for sure an adventure, but it all worked together. And I think Will Putney was very important in that process of he kind of gets what we were going for, and he just goes for it as hard as we do. And since we're friends with him, we've made really good friends with him. So he has a correction or something, we'll be like, all right, we'll take it seriously. He has a great input and stuff, so he helped a lot with that. And the interlude tracks on Immortal were done with real violins and real strings and stuff like that. And we were excited because it wasn't a synthetic, kind of a made up sort of thing, but we had kind of a vision for how it should sound, and we shared the same kind of an idea with Will, and he just got it right away. He's like, all right, we'll go for that too. And so there's interlude tracks, but it's not the same. It's not poetry. It's actually it's preaching from basically the last like 70 years or so from all over the world. So we preaching the same message.
Right.
Basically.
Wow.
So we had Leonard Ravenhill, who's from the UK. You guys love that.
Yeah.
We had Leonard Ravenhill and Brian Harbonke was on there.
Oh, he's amazing.
We love that guy.
Cool, yeah.
There's a part with Benny Hinn is on there, and we tried to cover. There's another gentleman KP Yohanan from India. So we covered a span of time, and we also were able to cover like geographic, areas, and then put it all together of them all preaching the same gospel. And it was incredible because it really began to shake up my life when I was listening to all the sermons to get the clips out of them. Is that all of these men were preaching the exact same gospel, and it was radical, man. It was cool just to see the harmony and years and different parts of the world and preaching the same gospel,
Brilliant. So, it's amazing how God is so constant throughout the world, and say, but God is just constant all the time. Last question, really. Well, two last questions. Is there one song that you could say would define what For Today is all about?
Goodness gracious.
Big one.
Man, White Flag on the last record. I think it's the most one of the most important songs we've ever written. So I suppose if we get that figured out,
write the For Today song.
there's a few things that in life that if you can figure it out, if you can get it to where you really get it, I'd say surrendering to God. I'd say fearing God. I'd say believing God. I'd say these things are below every other issue. If A.W. Tozer said once, he said 10,000 lesser problems would be solved if we came into a right understanding of what God is really like. And it's like, I love that quote because it's the truest thing in the world. If we could really begin to fear God, to believe God, what would you have? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
You think in the Christian life, there's so many other things that would be taken care of. And I think the surrendering that we talk about in White Flag is just that's very dear to us. It's a very important thing. So
lyrically, it's fantastic. Matt does a great job on it. It's good.
Let me just say that is that I wish you guys could have had the blessing of having him here as well. He is
maybe one day. Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
he's
my best friend. He's a man of God, and he is. I rejoice in being able to say that he is true, that he is the same way, and even more devoted off stage than he is on stage.
Maddie, if you're watching, listen, we want you in the UK, buddy.
That's right, man. That's
cool,
good, man.
Cool. Okay, this is the last question. If you had one day left to live, which is not a great thought, like it sort of is, because you'll be meeting the Father. Yeah. But if you had one day left to live, what would your parting message be?
Cool, man. That's awesome. I would actually suppose that I wouldn't want any of my days or anything that I talk about to be lived as though it's not my last day. Yeah. I actually have put together kind of like a life resolutions list in the last few months, and it's been really interesting to be challenged to actually live it out, because that's a really hard thing when you think of sometimes there's days that are just wasted. You know what I mean? They're just wasted days, and I kind of came to a point in my life where I was sick of having wasted days. I was sick of falling asleep, being like, that day was kind of a mockery to God. That day was not worthy of the gospel that I believe in. That day was not significant. I did not spend it with the Lord. I did not spend it honoring the Lord. I did not spend it sharing the gospel. I did not spend it doing anything that will last into eternity. I literally wasted a day. And I came to this understanding. There's a man, I believe it was Leonard Ravenhill. He said, you have nothing to do but save souls. Maybe it was Charles Finney. He said, you have nothing to do but save souls, so spend and be spent in this work. And I would suppose that if I don't treat today as the last day I may ever get to preach the gospel, I just am supposed to be missing out. I suppose I'd be messing up my whole day. So I'd preach the gospel. That'd be my final message. I'd preach that there is hope to be delivered from the wrath of God that people deserve, and it's by the body and blood of Jesus Christ that was crushed for my sins. And golly, I will be investigating and learning about the gospel. It's such an understatement to even say it like that. Is that I will be investigating and learning about the gospel into my millionth year in eternity, and I will, man, that's it. That is it. That is all. It's sufficient for my discipleship. It's sufficient for my life with God. It's sufficient for my message. It's sufficient for everything. The gospel of Jesus is sufficient for the rest of my life to the day that I die. And I hope that's the last message I get to preach. The gospel.
Fantastic.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming to Meltdown. We look forward to seeing what your ministry takes you next.
Yeah, thank you. Man.
Awesome. Yeah, my name's Matt, and this has been an interview for Detonation magazine. Catch you soon.